Hey friends, welcome to the Living Truth podcast. This is Kristin Carey hosting you today, and I am eager to have a conversation with my friend and colleague, Stacey Sadler. Stacey, thank you so much for being on the Living Truth podcast with me today.
Oh, thank you. It's an honor. I'm excited to chat with you.
So you guys, Stacey, I've known of her and I've been Facebook friends with her for a long time because of being in this field of betrayal trauma recovery. But we got to spend time together for the first time this past April at the Christian Sex Addiction Specialists International Conference. And oh my goodness, Stacey, I feel like you are just a kindred spirit. Like we ended up going out for meals together or hanging out and having meals together multiple times. And I just felt like you were like my long lost sister. Like we could just talk. And like, it was just so much fun. It was so much fun. So you guys, Stacey has so many things that she has accomplished. One of those is that she is a licensed professional counselor. She is trained in EMDR. She's also trained by APSATS. If you're new to this realm of betrayal trauma recovery, you might not know what APSATS is. It stands for the Association of Partner of Sex Addicts Trauma Specialists. And so it is a way to know whether somebody is going to be operating out of the trauma model when they're dealing with the partner who's experienced betrayal. Stacey also recently became the Chief Clinical Officer for Daring Ventures, which I was so thrilled with when I saw it because I love Daring Ventures and Dr. Jake Porter, and you're amazing. And I know Andrea just started working there too, and Kathy and Connie. And I feel like I've had almost everybody on staff with Daring Ventures on our podcast because I love y'all so much. You like that, y'all? That's for the Texans.
Yes, way to go.
Anyways, Stacey also speaks at the Restore Conference, which is New Life Ministries conference for betrayed partners. So she's on the board of New Life, and she recently wrote a book about loving your child as a single parent. So before you tune out, if you're not a single parent, we are going to cover the topic of parenting, especially after the crisis of unwanted sexual behavior and or sexual betrayal hits your marriage. And the reason I think Stacey's perspective, especially having been a single parent for how many years, Stacey? Were you a single parent?
How many years was I? I still am. I mean, they don't grow up, right? No, they do. But my kids are older, and a divorce happened to me later in life. So my kids were about, and you'll understand my story because there was a period of, oh, I'm going to file for divorce. Oh, no, I'm not. Oh, yes, I am. Oh, I'm going to wait and pray and pray that God changes his heart. So there's this period of time. So it's hard to exactly say when, but, my kids were 13 and 17 when it happened. So they were teenagers.
When your divorce was finalized or when you first started living as a single parent?
Oh, well, now you're getting into the minutia. That was confusing. I mean, there's a lot of confusing time in there because there were 2 years of separation in there too.
So here's what I'm saying, you guys, if you're tuning in, is even if you're still married, I encourage you to listen to this because most of us that go through this area of betrayal trauma and unwanted sexual behavior at some period of time are either going through a separation because of the crisis in our marriage, or perhaps you are the one who has functioned as the adult and the responsible person while your spouse has been like neck or eyeball deep in their addiction. And that has caused them to not be able to be as present as a parent. Whatever your situation, this is a very common thing for couples going through these issues to figure out, how is this going to impact my kids, the unwanted sexual behavior and the betrayal trauma that the partner is going through, and the distraction that we're dealing with as we're going through these crises. Is this going to ruin my children? Could my children ever survive, bounce back from this? Many of us, I assume you included, Stacey, who are reticent. Should I get a divorce? The covenant has been broken. I know I have a biblical grounds because there's been betrayal. However, is that going to ruin my kids? All the questions, right, that swirl in our heads.
Absolutely. Yep. There's just so many questions. And, I can relate to, the very first line of my book was, I was a single parent long before I was a single parent. And I had to take it out because it so rang true to me when I started writing the book. And I had to take it out because of legal reasons. They said, write him out of the book. So anything you're saying about him, which was pretty hard to do, but things that were directly like that, I had to take out. But the truth is, I did feel like the only single parent. And I described a day where, I was dealing with everything from, getting them their benefits, not, I don't know that they ever were on Medicaid, but they were on CHIP, which was assistance, because there was finances were shot, because addiction shoots finances. So I had to go from getting them to their activities to bargaining for, low cost medical care to, dealing with the latest crisis over SpongeBob, doing homework, getting them here, getting them there, and doing everything because addiction rendered my spouse pretty much incapable of carrying part of the load. So what we have today, what we have to say today, and what's in my book is good for whether you're legally separated or divorced or just feel like you are.
Yeah. Yeah. It is very, very, very lonely to deal with this. And I also was a single parent. Really, if I count from the last time we separated until I remarried in 2010, I was a single parent for a little over 5 years. My son was a baby when I divorced. And so this is a really important topic to me personally too, because that was one of the loneliest and most painful seasons of my entire life.
Yeah. And I think that's part of it, the loneliness and painful season of it. There's even shame attached to it for so many people, especially Christians who, like, it's just like the scarlet letter. I felt like I was wearing a scarlet letter D when I went into church. And so the first few times I was like, it was an unwanted divorce. I felt like I had to justify, things just because I felt like I was wearing it. Because church so heralds marriage that, there really isn't a lot of places for single parents. And it's sad, or single people. And sometimes you feel like an outcast as a single person. So it was really, really difficult and really lonely until I started to embrace it and learn different, heal from what had happened, and learn to embrace the singleness and the choice and the freedom and the peace that came with it.
Okay, I want to hear about that. How did you get there?
Well, a lot of grieving. First of all, tons and tons of grieving, because what I wanted to happen wasn't happening. So I was still married, and I could see that what I was so wanting for my marriage, the fantasy I had built up in my head, the hope and the dream just wasn't happening. And so I was grieved. And then when I finally had to surrender the marriage to God, and I told somebody this just this morning in a session, I put my nose in the carpet and surrendered my marriage. Okay, fine, Lord, I give it to you. I'm going to stop trying to change him, because I thought that's what a good Christian wife was supposed to do. And, I just give it to you. I let it go. It's in your hands. And then he said, what about your other hand? And I went, wait a minute. You maybe want me to, I just let go of praying that you would restore it. And he goes, give me both hands. So it was like this full surrender of, you, Lord, it's your will, not mine. I'm not in control. Mm-hmm. And who likes surrender? And there's no way we can get to acceptance of that situation without a lot of grief.
Absolutely.
went through a lot of emotions in letting go and thinking I would never ever have a relationship or the relationship that I wanted again. And I didn't want singleness, and through my 8 years even of being single, I didn't want singleness. I mean, I learned to embrace it, but my true heart's cry was to be married and to be married in a fulfilling way. And I just would be honest with God and tell him that. But I did learn to hold on to that truth of that's what I want, but I'm also accepting my singleness. And so with that, I found just a lot of freedom. I travel all over the country. I mean, it didn't come right away. I'll remember one of the first times I started realizing the freedom that would come with singleness. My daughter and I drove my son up to school, or drove up to visit him. And it was kind of like, we can pick our own hotel room. We get to stay where we want to stay. And oh, we could stop at this little amusement park kind of thing. It was a cave, a cavern place. We can do that if we want to, and we get to pick where we want to eat. And so we found this great little hideaway that was our little escape, and made it ours. And so I was recreating a new sort of life for myself with new memories and new emotions. And the best thing is I got to pick it all myself. I didn't have to deal with anybody else. So there was joy. There started to become joy in it as well.
Wow. But it's a long journey from realizing and accepting that my spouse is not going to change, and staying, the pain of staying, especially when you feel God has released you and there's been infidelity, and that pain of staying becomes greater than the pain of letting go.
Yeah.
But then you still have this very painful process of watching your children process the loss and the grief, and going through all of the grieving process. And so if you could think of some tips for our listeners, like, not that you can fast track it, you really can't. This is not a fast process, no matter how you do it. However, I think there's some ways that we tend to shoot ourselves in the foot and make it take longer. I'm just going to name one. I'm going to name one right now, Stacey, and that would be dating again too soon.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Oh, so we're in so much pain and we feel so rejected, right? Whether you're the person with the addiction or you're the person who's been betrayed, your divorce is finalized, you feel alone, you feel lonely, you feel rejected. I had two temptations. One was alcohol and one was dating again. And I ended up deciding not to drink during my early betrayal trauma recovery period at all, because I was concerned about developing an addiction because of my father had an alcohol addiction. And I was like, I don't want this to happen to me.
Me too.
And number two, dating. And I chose to wait until my therapist, I was asking her to kind of be my frontal lobe and help me think through, like, what is, like, I don't trust myself. I don't trust my impulse control. I'm like so sad. And so, and I don't want to be dating from a place of like barrenness and emptiness. I want to do it from a place of wholeness and self-acceptance. But I think those are two ways that we shoot ourselves in the foot. What are some other ways you think of that prolong our suffering?
Oh, great example. One, I think on top of that, I think both of those are wonderful examples. I always say to date, it takes time, energy, and emotion. And if you don't have that, then don't even attempt it, because you want it from a partner too. And if you're not finished grieving, you don't have the emotion. If you've got young kids, who knows, doubtful you have a lot of time. And it takes, and same with young kids with energy too, but it's like a part-time job. So I agree completely with what you said. I think one of the biggest mistakes that anybody can make in being single is going it alone. And I think the biggest thing is community and understanding where you need help and realizing your limitations in the very beginning, because marriage, God designed a family to be two people. two people carrying a load, and now it's one. So, you know, you might need help with childcare. You might need help with getting your kids from point A to point B. You might need a break every now and then. But a lot of us have trouble asking for help, have trouble saying, I can't do this on my own. And so it takes a village truly to raise, to be a single parent and to raise healthy kids. And there's nothing wrong with asking for help. We have to get past our perfectionism when we do that. And that's a big stumbling block for people. And so I think, you know, also if we are, you know, we have opposite sex kids than us, I think it's important that we have the opposite sex role model in their lives, especially if their parent isn't giving them, their other parent isn't giving them what they need, that you pray. I've always prayed for strong role models for my son, you know, for youth leaders or other men to come in, other dads to come in and be a strong dad to him. And so I think that's important. But realizing where the holes are is really important. Another thing that I think is important is to do your own work, to do your own healing. And I think that we can radically slow down the process if we don't embrace our own healing, if we just deny it or push it down. I think we're not there for our children. And I think we need to do our own work. And a lot of that includes having a community of people that we're healing with so that we don't rely on our children. Sadly,
oh my gosh, that's huge. That's hugely important. People are
sadly,
concerned they're going to ruin their children, like, and damage them and traumatize them beyond repair by divorce. I think you will traumatize them far more if you go to them for emotional support than
yes,
you will if you divorce. When you set a boundary and say, no, I'm not going to live like this anymore. I'm not going to live with abuse or adultery or,
right.
you know, sex addiction. That's a great model to our kids. But when we rely on them to get us through or for emotional support, that is extremely damaging.
It is. And their little brains and bodies are not designed to handle the big adult issues that, I mean, we're struggling. Why
Yeah.
would we put it on kids, whether they're adolescents or kids? It's too much for them. You know, their job description is eat, play, go to school, repeat. You know what I mean? Like they need to let your little kids be little, let them be kids, let the adult heavy stuff stay with you and your recovery and your people, your support system. Now, I think your kids need to see you have emotions.
Yeah.
Now, my daughter would come in, or she'd play love songs. She'd get in the radio and put on a love song, and I'd be like crying, and she'd go, "Mom, why are you always crying?" I'd say, "Well, you can't play that music, Mom. It's sad." You know, for me to go through a divorce and my kids not ever see me shed a tear, they're scratching their head going, "Oh, am I not supposed to feel sad when I lose
Right.
something I love?" Like, hold on. One minute mom's telling us she loves dad. Next minute, you know, she's fine. So I think it's important that we show our children our feelings, but that we don't rely on them for support or give them details about what's gone on in the relationship. I do think it's important to speak your truth to them as they get older. Especially if your spouse won't tell them the truth, I think it's important that you do speak truth about what's going on in the relationship. That's a bigger subject.
I was just going to say, do you have any, I do get that question a lot. Like, do you have any pointers on like what to tell kids?
Well,
I know it depends on their age.
for sure. And I would say, you know, little kids, you know, early on, I think it's, you know, just minimal information, answering their questions about it. The biggest thing that young kids are going to do is internalize it and think it's their fault. So the biggest thing you can say is, it's not your fault. It has nothing to do with you, and reassure that over and over again. And my favorite chapter in my book is about holding space for your children. And when you hold space for your children, when they say something like, well, I did something bad. That's why X, Y, Z,
Mhm.
that's why y'all didn't end up together. That's why daddy left. That's why mommy didn't come back. Instead of saying, no, 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 it's not you, ask them, really tell me more. And you lean in, just like validation, and say, tell me what you're feeling. Well, that time that I got in trouble at school and dad left the next day. You don't know what little associations they're making in their mind. So I always tell people, don't be so quick to jump in and say, no, it's not about you. No, it's not about you. Listen, lean in, hear what they're saying, and then absolutely tell them it's not about you. It's about, and if you can do it together with your spouse, great. My situation, that wasn't happening. So I just had to speak my truth of what the story was to the kids as in an age appropriate way. And, I spoke the truth, even though my daughter said, Mom, that's not the truth. And I said, it is the truth. And I recognized her need to be in denial for the while. But when she started seeing that it was the truth, she came back around and she said, Mom, you're right. It was the truth. And so it taught her to listen to her gut. So I think I'd say do it with some guidance,
Yeah.
get some good input about it. But that is the number one question we get asked at Restore all the time. What do I tell the kids?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And, I have a relative who just went through a disclosure, and I was talking to her this morning, and I talked to her about talking to the kids. I just briefly touched on it because she asked, what do we tell the kids? And she's got boys, and they are all, and the husband has a sex addiction, and they are all older. And she said, I don't think I'm going to say anything. She said, I think one struggles. And I said, mm-hmm. And she said, we went home and talked to them, and they were able to get everything off their chest that they had been feeling about the tension in the home. Kids are intuitive. They know. And so I always think that when we're in a place of recovery and a good headspace, I think it's important to talk to the kids.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And whenever possible, I think it's really helpful to get our kids their own therapist if they're willing to talk to somebody.
Yes, I would agree with you.
Yeah.
I think it's so important. And knowing when they're struggling with something. I think knowing your children and knowing when, don't put up with a lot of dysfunctional behavior. I know a lot of people out there that put up with children who are just little holy terrors. Sorry, but it's true. And the thing is that you don't have to put up with that. You shouldn't put up with that. But some of us come from such chaotic upbringings ourselves, we just put up with it thinking it's okay, or we don't know what to do about it. But tough love is a good thing to have, and letting your kids know that that behavior isn't okay, even though the cards they've been dealt aren't great,
Yeah.
is really important. They love boundaries. They need boundaries. And sometimes if you're the only boundaried parent, that feels pretty sucky,
It does.
when,
Yes.
when you got to be the one that's the bad guy.
Yeah.
But that creates safety, and they need that. Our kids crave that, and they need to learn to hear the word no. So it's really,
Yeah.
really important
Hmm.
to do that.